Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Let's jump right in today because an hour is not a long enough time to talk to our guests today about the particular topic we're talking about today. We're bringing back friends of the show, Dawn Brohon and Michael Graney, and we're going to be discussing the social program of Pope Leo XIV. Now, Joe and I, if you've listened to our show, you know we find that all Catholics should understand the social doctrine of the Catholic Church. Let's say going back to Pope Leo XIII, all right, with Rerum Novarum, then Pope Pius XI, then Pope John Paul II. If we understood that better, then maybe our economy, dare I say, Joe Resinello, might be in a little bit of better shape, okay? If people will start looking at the economy as not separate from our morality and all that we get from the church. Michael Graney, CPA, MBA, is a board member and director of research for the Center of Economic and Social Justice, CESJ, in Arlington, Virginia. He's published several articles and books on many subjects, including Catholic social teaching, banking, monetary history, and economic personalism. He's a graduate of Notre Dame University. Dawn Brohon is the founder, board member, and director of communications for CESJ. She's edited books, written articles, and organized forums on the natural law. I'm sure we're going to get into that somewhat. Based just third way, economic democratization and justice-based management. Dawn serves as project director and senior instructor for CESJ's Global Online Justice University. She's a graduate of Georgetown University. Dawn and Michael, welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. We're so happy to have you back.
We're very happy to be here again.
Awesome. And like I said, this is going to be a very good conversation. I'm going to throw it over to Joe and we'll get rocking.
We always begin with a prayer in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, never was it known that anyone who sought your help or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, a virgin of virgins, our mother. To you we come, for you we stand, sinful and sorrowful. Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your clemency hear and answer us. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So as Joe said, Dawn and Michael are friends of the show. They're basically always talking about, and they have a lot to say, and people should pay attention about the just third way. What they're basically telling us is, in a nutshell, in my book, things aren't working out, and we have to think of another way. What people don't realize is, as the middle class gets smaller and smaller, and it is getting smaller and smaller, what we're going to see in America are people filling a void. You're seeing people on both the right and the left who've lost hope. They simply have lost hope. And what happens when that happens? People get radicalized. You're seeing radical candidates on the right and radical candidates on the left who are basically saying, yes, I'm going to solve all your problems, when you know that is not going to happen. And that is why we need a just third way. And we think we have it, and that's why Dawn and Michael are here. But let's begin with Dawn. Clearly, capitalism, there has to be boundaries around capitalism, moral boundaries, we'll call them, fair play. When you look at basically our economy right now, you see BlackRock buying up everything. You see the middle class getting squeezed. People should notice gas prices didn't go down. Food prices didn't go down. How does the regular person make it? Dawn, I'll be truthful with you. I'm not bullish, and I do think we need a just third way. What do you think?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that we're seeing a collapse, a chasm between human beings. And this is not just a problem about the disappearing middle class. It's really a fundamental conflict between universal principles and those ideas that divide people or concentrate power. So when we look at what some may call American capitalism, it shares many of the same flaws as what we would call socialism or communism. And that is, it isn't rooted in the dignity and freedom and empowerment of each and every human being from the moment they're born to the moment they die. And so our systems are set up in such a way that it breaks people into different classes instead of looking at really every human being, what do we need? We need dignity, we need freedom, and to have those things, to safeguard them, we need power of our own. And where power gets concentrated, as you can see, is now happening at an accelerating pace. You have corruption, you have manipulation of the political system, and the economy itself starts to become so unstable and so unbalanced that people can't live decent lives. So when we talk about the just third way, to really simplify the major elements of this, and we believe that this is reflected in the social encyclicals of the church, including Leo the 13th and Pius the 11th and the personalism of John Paul II. We find a commonality. I'm not Christian, but I see the universality in the social encyclicals, and I believe Leo the 14th can be the bridge to the next development in human civilization. And that the just third way, it goes beyond economics, but in focusing on that area, we see how we can liberate people from the slavery of toil for toil's sake and the ability to work for the development of civilization and society and the important things that what makes us human. But essentially, it's you look at, does an idea or a paradigm start with the notion of the dignity of each human being? So the person is critical to how we develop our paradigms and systems. We look at, does the system allow people to develop, to be free, to exercise power over their own lives? Now, what is it that they need? And this is becoming very evident, more so at this time than any other time. It's always been evident that the rich have power. And what is it that gives them power? Well, obviously, they're able to sustain themselves. They have the economic freedom. They have the means to engage in leisure or other activities, including controlling other people. So we have to see, is property spread out? That Leo the 13th was very concerned about that. And then what do we mean? Leo the 13th was looking at land ownership, and we're today looking at the more advanced forms of capital. And capital are all non-human things that we use to produce goods and services. So owning capital is critical for human freedom, dignity, and empowerment in today's economy and world. How do we get that? Leo the 13th was talking about the sacredness of private property. Okay, that every human being is by nature entitled to this. How, when you have this right, do you exercise it? And that's where we look in terms of the economy. The key social tool is money and credit. So that's, in a nutshell, the just third way.
Well, Dawn Brohan and Michael Graney are joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. We're going to be talking about the social program of Pope Leo the 14th. So we're laying a little foundation. Michael, let me come over to you. Dawn said some words that just trigger me, and I mean trigger in a positive way, okay? Slavery, all right? Because people don't see themselves as slaves. Yet here's where I'm going to throw it over to you, Michael. I'm going to offer you one difference, but my larger question is for our audience, right, for Joe and I, to outline some of the differences between Catholic social doctrine and, let's say, what we call conservatives, okay? You know, God-fearing Christian conservatives in America call American capitalism, and you can't say anything bad about capitalism. I'll give you one big difference. Slavery. Dawn just hit on it. One of the big differences for me, and then I'll throw it over to you, is the Catholic social doctrine is about the system, in this case, the economic system, serving the people. Dare I say, the family, all right? And American capitalism right now, the individual and the family exist to serve the system and those who control the system. Michael, am I being conspiratorial? Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you think?
Well, you can be conspiratorial without being wrong.
This is true. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah, I would correct one other word. I would say Catholic social teaching instead of doctrine. Doctrine has a specific meaning. And if you say Catholic social doctrine, people tend to take every word that the Pope speaks as absolutely infallible, which is not quite the way we're supposed to view infallibility. As, if we get to it, John Henry Newman, for example, understood infallibility, and a lot of people today don't. But social teaching is an application of doctrine and the principles of natural law. And the principles behind Catholic social teaching can be infallible. The specific applications of Catholic social teaching, which are the bulk of the social encyclicals, are not and cannot be by the nature of infallibility itself. Newman explained this when he got into a semi-debate with William Ewart Gladstone, the British Prime Minister in the 19th century. They agreed on a lot of things, but Gladstone never understood infallibility any more than a lot of Catholics do today. Now, addressing American capitalism, it really isn't classical capitalism at all. It's really a form of Fabian socialism. It's inspired by the theories of the American agrarian socialist Henry George, and see John shaking her head, says, oh no, he's talking about Henry George again, filtered through the economic theories of John Maynard Keynes. And the Fabian tactic, of course, is to institute socialism by calling it something else. As you may or may not know, their emblem is the wolf in sheep's clothing. So what we call socialism, what we call American capitalism, is really a variety of socialism. And almost explicitly so since the New Deal. Now, the idea behind American capitalist socialism or socialist capitalism, as in the so-called Great Reset, which Don and I co-authored a book on, available from 10 books, free plug there, is for an economic political elite to take care of everybody. This is in the best way that it can be done. The worst of both possible worlds. It's an arrangement Hilaire Belloc termed the servile state. Although back in 1912, when he said it, the task of the servile state was to find enough people for jobs, whereas today it's to find enough jobs for people. According to Keynes, the only way you can get income is by jobs or welfare, not ownership. It can't be done by ownership. That this is a cornerstone of Keynesian economics and thus of American capitalism, if you want to call it capitalism. Believe it or not, Annie Besant, a leader in the Fabian Society and successor to Madame Blavatsky, called this arrangement her fairy state, in which an elite controls everyone else for their own good. Ownership of capital must be concentrated in the hands of a private sector elite in charge of the state or in the hands of the state itself. So that Catholic social teaching, on the other hand, is directed to, not to get too deep here, the Aristotelian Thomist ideal of every person pursuing the good life of virtue, which, as Aristotle pointed out, and we find throughout Catholic social teaching, ordinarily requires widespread capital ownership. This is because power follows property, as Daniel Webster pointed out, and you need power to do anything and build habits of doing good. A habit of doing good is what we call virtue. That is why Fulton Sheen insisted private property and capital is the cornerstone of Catholic social teaching. Private property is not the end of Catholic social teaching, although we've been accused of saying that, however, but it's the means to implement it and the principal vehicle for the restructuring of the social order to provide the proper environment so that everyone can become more fully human, which is another way of saying become virtuous. Virtue is literally manness, but it signifies humanness. So to grossly oversimplify, American capitalism, so-called, is directed at an elite taking care of other people, while Catholic social teaching is directed to people being able to take care of themselves.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Michael Graney and Dawn Borhunter joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. We're discussing the social program of Pope Leo XIV. We laid a little groundwork, with the first couple of questions. Joe, I'll hand it over to you.
Dawn, talk to us about AI, because ultimately Pope Leo XIV, one of the reasons why he chose the name Leo is he feels that we're entering what was commonly called, or what is commonly called, the fourth industrial revolution. AI is soon to make a splash. It already has in many ways. I've heard that in San Francisco, they have driverless cabs. I heard that there's some prototypes of them in Austin, Texas, now that Elon Musk is a Texan. And we're going to see a lot more of that, which means that jobs are going to disappear. And it's not just going to be jobs on the lower end. It's going to be jobs in the middle, and it's even going to be jobs on the higher end. Engineers are going to become obsolete in some situations. So what do we do? And AI is a problem. So talk to us about the impact, and what do you think Pope Leo is going to say about it?
Well, when you talk about AI, I view it as it's a tool for human beings to use, and in this case, mainly for economic production. And it is, I think you mentioned the fourth industrial revolution, which was a term that was popularized by Klaus Schwab, who was the founder of the World Economic Forum that brings together the elite of the world to try and come up with solutions to global problems. Now, what makes AI different and extremely dangerous is that it is very rapidly being able to not only substitute or replace many forms of work, it's starting to develop its own ability to, in a sense, think without moral boundaries. And so it also, it brings to mind a little anecdote I had. It was trying to see whether AI and their various platforms like Perplexity and Claude, ChatGPT, we wanted to see if it could understand the basic principles of the just third way, which today is absolutely non-existent in academia. Okay, so what gets taught, the basic ideas are, as Mike was saying, are premised on the assumptions, this is the economics in particular of John Maynard Keynes, even where certain schools of economics won't acknowledge that. But his ideas, which are very wage welfare centered. So one of the assumptions that AI, if you go out and you ask it a question, it will answer according to the existing paradigms. And I don't care whether it's capitalism of any form as it exists today or socialism or communism. They operate in different ways, but they all concentrate power. So one of the exercises we went through is, for example, how does the relative contribution of capital, which we believe is 90% versus 10% labor, how would you come up with evidence for this? And the AI went out and said, actually, the evidence points to labor contributing 70% and capital producing 30% of all goods and services. And so then we asked it, well, when you take into account subsidies and protectionist measures and forced minimum wage increases, that has an impact. If you took those away, how would you then account for the contribution of capital to labor? And it went around in circles, but pretty much justifying the conventional way the economics is thought of today. But then I asked a question, well, what about the example of an elevator operator who at one point you needed to have human beings to operate the elevator so people could go up and down the floors. Now you don't have that at all. And the AI responded, well, that's very interesting because you just give an example of where human labor as a productive input is almost zero. And I asked for other examples, and it goes to manufacturing with the Chinese factories that are now 90% robotized, 10% human labor doing mainly oversight and and correct oversight, I would say, basically. And agriculture, the introduction of very advanced, mechanisms for not only tilling the soil but harvesting the crops. And this is it. And as you said, this replacement of human labor of all forms, not just manual, is taking place very rapidly in medicine. It gave that example of robotic surgery. It's taking place in engineering. It's taking place in law. So what we're finding is all this job creation is, much of it increasingly is going to be for the lowest forms, lowest paying jobs, farm work, cleaning toilets, it's so the sort of things. And also, to be fair, education where you need human beings or home care. So what you see is a dangerous trend where you have something that is so powerful and geometrically improving without this moral compass or this basic notion of how does this serve the good of each and every human being, no matter where they are, no matter what system they live in. So this is the problem with AI. Now, whether, and I pray for this, that we will have the wisdom to be able to bring this tool under human control, and not just a few humans, but where everyone has some power, and that is through ownership. If you don't have ownership, you don't have economic power. And we, as Leo the 13th and Pius the 11th said, private property is sacred, inviolable. We cannot deprive those who own of their property rights. So the Just Third Way presents a very practical and moral way to open up the opportunities to every person to become an owner of those tools that are replacing our labor, the need for it, so we can be free to do human work.
Dawn, I want to throw it over to Michael. Michael Graney and Dawn Brohon are joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe to talk about the social program of Pope Leo the 14th, the Just Third Way. Michael, here's the thing I think that I want to comment on from you that Dawn mentioned, okay? People think that it's just like you mentioned, robo-taxis and things like that, lower-end jobs that are going to be dispensed with, dock workers. My old man was a Teamster. I worked in trucking for a long time. Like all those jobs. We need to emphasize, if we're going to talk about this topic, we need to emphasize to the wider crowd, not just to Catholics, to tell the doctors and the lawyers out there and the people who consider themselves on the higher end and they're indispensable, dude, you go too. Because if the machine can diagnose the person, and that's, I believe, I hope I get this right. I think that's one of the things that Palantir is doing with their chips, is they actually are developing technology where the machine goes into you and tells you not only what ails you now, but in the future. Okay, that seems to me to be replacing the role of the doctor, and then the machine doing the surgery, because the machine is much more precise. So guess what you don't need, or what you do need at that point is a technician, not a doctor. Michael, what I'm asking is this, before we go to the break in a few minutes. Everybody's got to open their eyes, because everybody's job is dispensable and everybody becomes a slave and nobody owns property. Where am I wrong, Michael Graney?
You're not. I mean, as William Cobbett said over almost 200 years ago, either you are secure in ownership of your property or you are a slave. The solution, of course, is what Leo the 13th pointed out, is if you own the machines that are doing the production, then you own the production. If you don't, then whoever owns the machines that are doing the producing owns the production. And the rest of us are under their control, because how else are we going to get anything to live on?
No, exactly. Michael, if I can stay there for a second. When you guys talk about ownership, are we simply talking about, let's say, owning your own home? Like, what exactly do you mean by ownership? Just I know for me, I'm asking, but for our audience, what tangibly, what are we talking about?
Okay, we're talking about ownership of the means of production. Now, even Marxist communism said people should own private property in consumer goods. They could own cars, they could own homes. Big deal. What is important is private ownership of the means of production, and it must be as widespread as possible, because every single person, whether by labor or capital or both, must be able to produce, because to keep the economy in balance, every producer must consume and every consumer must produce. And in aggregate, production must equal consumption. Otherwise, why produce if it's not going to be consumed? And how can you consume if it's not going to be produced?
Okay, I got you.
Joe,
Go ahead.
I'd like to
Go
add,
ahead, Dawn.
I'd like to add one thing to what Mike said. When we talk about ownership of productive things, capital, we want to recognize the word property and private property. What does that mean? Now, some might read Leo the 13th encyclical Rerum Novarum and think that he's only talking about land, because that was the more dominant form of production, or that was a critical thing to own in order to produce. Today, as we've been discussing, we're looking to advance technologies. These are also a means of production or capital. The question is, do you have the right to control it? Do you have the right to the fruits of what it produces? That is property. So when he talked about a property in land, he's talking about those rights of control and the rights to the reward, the fruits of the distribution. So it's very important for all people to start understanding that notion of property, because it already has been diluted in terms of ownership of corporate shares, corporate equity, that according to the rights of property, the shareholders should have power over the shares that that person owns, meaning decision making, proportionate decision making, and also the rights to that proportion of fruits, which in this case would be their share of the profits that are earned, the dividends paid out. That is now taken away from the shareholder. It flows to management right now to determine if dividends, which are the fruits of what was produced, will they be paid out to the owners?
Dawn, let's take a quick break here at the front line with Joe and Joe. This is a very, very interesting conversation. We're talking about the social program of Pope Leo XIV. We're going to get into more of Pope Leo XIV in the next segment. We're with Dawn Brohon and Michael Graney. Michael, real quick for our audience, I want you to send me all the links for everything you guys are doing so I can put them in the the comment section. But where could our audience members find out more about what you guys are doing, get more in depth?
The fastest way is to go to our website, which is cesj.org. There's so much there that if we start sending you all the links to the separate pages, you would be here forever.
All right. So I'm going to make sure I put in cesj.org. And I think, and we're going to go to a break, I think this is one of the most important things that we could do. Not just, I know, Dawn, I know you're not Catholic, but as Catholic Americans, I think we need to really spearhead this and convince other people, because this is a matter of, really, I hate to sound so dramatic, it's a matter of life and death. What do you want for your children, your grandchildren? Do you want servitude or do you want prosperity? And that applies to all people. So Michael Graney and Dawn Brohon are with us at the front line with Joe and Joe. We're talking about the social program of Pope Leo XIV on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith in the New York City metropolitan area. Stick around. We have another great segment with Michael and Dawn. We'll be right back.
You can call Dawn Catholic with a small c.
And I agree with you, Joe.
Welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Rossinello. We are way in the breach with Dawn Brohon and Michael Graney, and we're discussing the social program of Leo XIV, Pope Leo XIV. I'm going to hand it right over to Joe Rossinello.
This conversation is very important, and Michael and Dawn did a great job in breaking down the problem as well as breaking down the reality of what the American economy is all about. I think a driving problem is, particularly amongst people who are, say, upper middle class and above, who are educated, they think this doesn't affect me, so I don't have to worry about it. No, it does affect you, because the more unstable our nation gets, it does affect you. It will affect you. And we don't want an unstable nation. And the direction things are going, it's not a healthy direction. That's number one. Number two, and this is something, because I'm a realist and I'm also a very practical person, and I want to throw this first to Michael, and then I'm interested in what Dawn has to say about it as well. You're talking about spreading out power, basically. Ownership in a more broader sense. That's kind of how I basically understand this. What makes us think, in a practical matter, that the oligarchs of this nation will go along? Because ultimately, the way I see America, and I read an article years ago in Forbes that basically said Russia has 365 oligarchs, America has 365,000, but America is an oligarchy. And I see it that way, truthfully, through lobbies. America moves. Money moves the nation. The regular guy has a voice, but only so much of a voice. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, clearly has more of a voice than me. Super PACs clearly have more of a voice than me. This is reality, people. And if you think that we're all equal, you're not paying attention. You're simply not paying attention. What makes us think that the oligarchs are going to just share the ownership? Because to be honest with you, they don't even want to share basic things. Never mind ownership. First to Michael, then to Dawn.
Okay. First, we're not asking them to share what they already own. What we say is we should cut people in on the increase, the annual increase that occurs each year in a normal, healthy economy. Second, what use is it to be rich if nobody else has any money? If you are the only one who can afford to produce anything and the only one who is able to produce anything, you can pile it up forever, but if no one else has any money to buy it with, and as Jean-Baptiste Say pointed out over 200 years ago, we don't buy productions with money. We buy what other people produce with what we produce. It's production for production. You can't wave a magic wand and create purchasing power the way Keynes thought you could, because look what you get, $36 trillion worth of government debt that you can never repay. Well, we can, but that's another issue. So that if we can produce, then we can buy what the rich are producing. So not even enlightened self-interest on the part of the oligarchs, but pure selfishness says, we better let these people produce, otherwise we won't stay rich, because what we'll have is a big pile of stuff that we can't consume, and we're going to starve to death ourselves in the midst of plenty because we can't get what we want because the other people aren't producing it. That's pretty much it. If we can't produce, I remember an after-school special that had a kid wish with a genie for all the money in the world. And he got all the money in the world, which meant that all the economic activity ceased. He had all the money in the world, didn't do a bit of good because he couldn't spend it on anything, because the moment he tried to spend it, it came back to him. He couldn't buy food, and other people couldn't eat either.
I think that's what we have to emphasize to people. Dawn Broho, in your comments.
I think Mike makes a very important observation from the standpoint of just economics, and that idea which Louis Kelso, and I would really recommend that all your listeners start exploring the ideas of Louis Kelso, because he not only was what we would call a universal ownership economist, he also was a corporate finance lawyer who understood how finance and money works. So when we talk about what is the instrument, the main instrument which enables the rich to get richer and the rest of the population to be gradually enslaved and powerless, and that is how we create and control money. And one of Kelso's important insights, and I think this addressed some of the questions in the social encyclicals about, we know what we want to achieve, and that is to enable the most number of people to want to become owners and make it possible for them to do that. They didn't know how to do it because they were looking at the way most people think you finance new capital growth, like AI or robotics, the things the businesses need to use. They think the only way to finance this growth is to accumulate savings, to cut your consumption, accumulate it, then go out and buy the new capital using your past savings. And that's not how the rich do it. they are able to get loans and not even use their savings. What they do own is considered to be that risk insurance, the collateral, by which lenders will then make them provide additional money for them to go out, buy more capital, produce more, get the proceeds, the profits, which they can't consume all this. It's become, humanly impossible. So what do with what they can't consume? They go out and they can invest more. In fact, they can invest more without even expending their savings. So you've got this crazy monetary system, which it's number one, based the whole question of what is your money, what stands behind your money. Well, today almost universally it's government debt. That's a problem right there. So what Kelso talked about was how do we connect every person to the new technologies that are going to be producing more of our goods and services so they can generate their own income as their labor becomes less and less necessary in terms of production. You have to open up a way that respects private property, but opens up a route for every human being to become an owner of the new capital that will be created and will be needed by businesses. It is in the money system, how we create it and back it, and how it gets extended to every person in an orderly way that is basically providing equal opportunity. It's not, as Mike says, it's not taking away any of the past savings or wealth of the presently rich. It's just saying, for the good of humanity, for the survival of humanity, and if you really believe in democracy and treasure our civilization, we have to have economies which are stable, which enable people to produce so they can consume what they need. And if they can't produce enough through their labor, we have to tie them into the dominant mode of production. So this is, in terms of whether a small group of oligarchs who, you're right, I mean, we don't know half of what's going on, the wheeling, dealing, behind the scenes, the political influence. I mean, there's no shame in this. It's pretty much going out and buying elections right out in the open. Okay, and this can happen when people don't have the power to stand up and say, you do that and we are no longer your customers. Or when the normal citizen, the average citizen, has to worry about losing their job because they won't be able to, pay for their housing, their health, their children's education. That becomes really, that's how you become enslaved, through your stomach first, then through your mind. And that's what, yeah.
No, let me stay there for 1 second, Michael. I hope you don't mind. I just want to stay in that for 1 second. When I look at recent events in the federal government, namely the one big beautiful bill, okay, here's my thing. Everything you guys are talking about right now, I say to myself, that's why people like Joe and I'm going to speak for us two, okay? That's why we're disappointed in the big beautiful bill. Because it was supposed to be something that was going to be a bit more, dare I say, revolutionary. Maybe along the lines, maybe not exactly, but along the lines of something like you guys are talking about, where the interest of the regular person and families comes first. And I looked at that thing and said, nope. And then when I saw we were going to do an interview with you, I was like, well, this is what Michael and Dawn talk about all the time, because that doesn't represent what I think we need. It's crumb, all right, which is more than some would give us. It's a crumb, but that's not what we're talking about. And everything you guys are saying in this conversation here at the front line with Joe and Joe, remind me, that's why that thing was passed, because they, and that cuts across political parties, they want to keep this oligarchic system in place and not do the things that you two are talking about with CESJ and what Pope Leo the 14th, why we think he took Pope Leo the 13th's name. They don't want to do that. And they somehow, some way need to be forced to do that. Dawn, I'll throw that to you and then to Michael. I think that's something that's on the minds of a lot of our listeners.
Okay, a couple things. We need leaders, moral leaders who are clear, who can speak universally to universal principles. They have to reach the 99% of humanity, which is becoming less, they're becoming more powerless. They are becoming more unfree. They are becoming slaves. Now, if such a leader, and we believe that Pope Leo XIV can be that leader, that clear voice who can speak the simple universal principles and how we can live with technology that's making our concept of work needs to change. Our education, what we teach people, the big beautiful bill in my mind was such a phony. But how would anyone know? They want something different. They see that the trends are leading us over the cliff. They see a possibility to change that, to put the brakes on. It was more of the same. And if you look at the underlying principles, it's not to empower people. That's what we need to really focus on, not just this group or that group, this individual, this deserving, creative, brilliant, moral person deserves more to be an owner than this other person here. We have to stop thinking in that way. And I think this is where a moral leader like Leo XIV can be true to the doctrines of the Catholic Church. And I think the conservatives want to see that there is not this sudden shift to something that is, they would say, not Catholicism. That is part of his job. But the other, and he can't get away from this, he is now a world leader. This conversation needs to be held with him. We think that he would understand this, and it won't be him alone, because this is something which no person, even the greatest leader in the world, cannot change the world by him or herself.
Michael, your comments, please.
Yes.
I mean, Dawn teed it off for me. Use the golf term. She didn't tee me off. Now, see, the thing is, a great deal depends on factors over which Leo XIV has absolutely no direct control, but which he might be able to influence indirectly. First, of course, he has to deal with the radicals and the reactionaries in the Catholic Church, whom the media assume are the voice of the Church as well as of everything else. Then he has to communicate authentic doctrines and teachings and clarify a lot of the confusion over the last half century or so. Some of it seemingly deliberate, some of it nothing against Pope Benedict XIV, but he was so scholarly that he left himself wide open to misinterpretation. And now, if I didn't believe that the Catholic Church was divinely instituted, I give Dawn a buy on that. Although run by fallible human beings, I would suggest throwing in the towel at this point. I could insert something here about Hilaire Belloc's possibly apocryphal comment about the knavish imbecility which often afflicts those in power in the church and elsewhere. We won't mention anything. But there's far too much of that to be said on that score, so we'll kind of go by that. I think Leo XIV has made a good start by what appears to be an effort to rein in both the radicals on the left and the reactionaries on the right. The former want to create a new religion, and the latter want to create a mythical medieval church that never existed except in their own mind and institute a theocracy. But he is handicapped by the same thing which has stymied implementation of both Catholic religious and social doctrine, and is, in my opinion, at the root of individual and social problems that have led to the current state of society. And that is, as Dawn rather subtly hinted, a monetary system that inhibits or prevents people from participating fully in both individual and social life. A love of money may be the root of all evil, as St. Paul said to Timothy, but the proper use of money can be the root of a great deal of good as well, as Louis Kelso pointed out. Now, in my opinion, if Leo XIV would give serious consideration to an encyclical following up on Rerum Novarum in the area of economic justice, explaining clearly the principles and differences between the principle and application of principle, as well as a few other key points, as the primacy of reason, illuminated and guided by faith, and not faith alone, which is modernism, fideism, he might be able to help guide the world and people of all faiths and philosophies back to a more rational path. Now, we, of course, at CESJ believe the more rational path is the just third way of economic personalism. Another book plug here. You can get it free on the CESJ website. But Leo XIV's primary task at this point is to get the process started, possibly, as Don hinted, by calling a series of conferences, first in the church, then broadened to all faiths and philosophies to discuss ways of learning and implementing a more just and rational system of the world based on natural law. Now, an encyclical addressed to all people of goodwill, as many of them in the last century or so have been, outside the church, could then be issued to guide the process. In my opinion, and this addresses the big, beautiful bill, the encyclical should be as short as possible, giving guidelines and principles, not trying to lay out specifics or micromanage or cover every single detail in all aspects. In my opinion, many recent encyclicals began so voluminous and tried to say everything that they end up saying nothing, because the more you put something into something like that, the more you can find to contradict, misinterpret, distort, or use to circumvent truth and virtue, to the point the encyclical ends up doing exactly the opposite of what was intended, as, in my opinion, the big, beautiful bill is doing. That thing is so gigantic, it ends up doing nothing or just total harm. It's like, do you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark? The little golden idol that Indiana Jones grabs, which is supposed to solve some kind of problem, or at least the plot hook. And that triggers this gigantic boulder coming down. That's the big, beautiful bill. It's not going to solve anything. It's just going to flatten us.
Let me go over to Joe Resinello real quick. Michael Graney and Dawn Brohorn are here at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. We're discussing the social program of Leo XIV. I have a quick comment because we have limited time. I'm going to hand it over to Joe. I am not Leo XIV. Okay. But this is where my head's in the clouds, but I don't care. Here's a novel idea. Pope Leo XIV should take advantage of modern media, leave the traditional media aside. All right, when he writes this, God willing, we'll pray that he writes this encyclical. He should have every major social media influencer in a room in Rome, pay for their airfare, whether it's Joe Rogan, Candace Owens, all of them, because let's face it, they have the widest audience, and lay it out. And then say, I think I've just made a whole lot of sense, particularly Catholic influencers, and there's a lot of them out there. You say, this is the message. You really care about people? You care about your kids, your grandkids, and the well-being economically, and taking power, yes, power away from those who have it right now, okay? Then you guys should be out there, and you should be getting this to a much wider audience. That's my 2 cents. Joe Resinello, give me your 3 cents.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Amen.
Everything, Michael, it's about 3 cents, about all it's worth, but I'll give it a shot. Michael, what he said, I agree with 100%. What I would say, I believe in miracles. I think there are no coincidences. Dawn, in the beginning of the conversation, when we were talking before we went on, she basically said, I think that, Pope Leo is perfectly suited for this time. Many things are coming together. For the Catholics out there, pray to Our Lady. Our Lady, I do that. Have her whisper in his ear. That's how things move. That would be a very influential thing. That's what I'm going to do. But as far as a lot of the things, and this is my question, I want to start it out with Dawn, and then we can move it to Michael. We talked about basically what our solution is. But let's go to Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab, I think, sees the problem as you guys see the problem, laying it out. His answer is a universal income. That is something that's been thrown out of his organization, which is slavery. Give someone $1,000 a month and you're basically on the plantation. That's their answer. I think they see the problem. Many intellectuals for a while now have forecasted this problem, particularly as AI develops. But their response, and I don't know if people are paying attention to that, but they actually say that outright. And we even had a presidential candidate in America who talked about a universal income. He didn't get the nomination. That should horrify people. Dawn, your comment on that, and then to Michael, because it horrifies me.
Yes, and we would say we should not be demanding universal income. We should be demanding universal capital ownership opportunity. and the means to acquire that.
That's right.
So it's a difference, as you say. One is slavery, one is independence, and personal power. And that is what a democracy must have. Power decentralized. The economy, the power in the economy must be decentralized. So if we don't deal with ownership in its full meaning in terms of property rights, and if we can't adjust our systems to open up that opportunity, then we're going to swiftly or slowly, we're going to go over the edge. So I think to add to Joe, your point about getting this to influencers, and Joe Resinello also to the power of prayer. In addition, I think that people should send this show to others they know and ask, what do you think about this? Because we have to also use the organizing power of human beings to make a clear case for a moral imperative. And we have to get it to people in power, whether it was LBJ during the Civil Rights Movement or to Pope Leo the 14th, who can extend this message globally. We need to also organize. So I thank you for what you're both doing, giving us this opportunity. But we need numbers of people who can share this with others.
Michael, how about you?
Yeah. One of the things that every single solution you'll hear and as being touted is that they all require somebody to give up something. I mean, Trump's art of the deal is anything but. There's no deal there. It's a lose-lose situation that he sets up to look spectacular. Keynesian economics says you rob the poor to make the rich richer, to create jobs for the poor so that they can create money to give to the rich. Welfare, the universal basic income, the Great Reset. The rich have to give up something to avoid envy, to distribute the income. The only thing that I've come across is what we call, the just their way of economic personalism as applied in the Economic Democracy Act, which we're not asking people to give up something. We're saying everybody can gain. And we're saying everybody. We're not excluding the rich. We're not excluding the poor. We're not excluding those people, who I mean. Everybody is given the equal opportunity and access to the means to acquire capital and become productive through their capital, or whatever, do whatever they want. But the fact is that we're saying everybody can win. We would like to set up a win-win situation, not a win-lose, or worse, today's lose-lose, where everybody loses.
But that requires, Michael Graney, that requires a mental a decision of the individual to understand.
And a leader like Leo the 14th.
What's that?
And a leader like Leo the 14th.
And a leader like Leo the 14th. But that requires the American peoples, particularly the ones we're talking about, they have to stop letting, because of political parties and political ideology, you have to stop. I'm speaking specifically of Republicans and conservatives now. Stop letting them tell you the Dow is at an all-time high and you should be happy and you can't buy a dozen eggs. And people think I exaggerate, but I'm not exaggerating. There are people that they're doing cartwheels down the street because the Nasdaq's at a high, and AI is going to change the world. Not for you. And if it does change the world, it's not going to be that pleasant. We only have a couple minutes left. I want to throw this over to Dawn first for a quick one, then to Michael. There's obviously some very fundamental differences between what the media calls progressive Catholics and traditional Catholics, okay? And I think this is one of those things that at least could get everybody, and there are some serious differences, okay? This one I think should bring everybody together, particularly in the Catholic Church, particularly amongst influencers and people who have people listening to them, okay? You think that this issue, this economic justice issue, the just third way issue, can bring together progressives and traditional Catholics at the same table to really force something good, to really, because all those other issues are all intertwined, but this is one where at least we can come to the table and get on the same page. Dawn, you have a minute, and then I'm going to throw it over to Michael for a minute.
I think you summed it up, Joe. And it's really, we all have to say, we're human beings. What is it that we all need? What would benefit all of us, our children, our grandchildren, and our posterity? And this is it, justice. What is justice? Let's come up with those universals again. Let's understand them.
I would say that. Let's get that right, and then we can work on everything else. Michael Graney, I got about a minute for you.
Okay. I think Leo the 14th is in my opinion, headed in the right way, particularly as signaled by his naming John Henry Newman, Doctor of the Church, reorienting things toward reason, getting away from emotion. And if Leo the 14th, if we could meet with him and basically just lay it out as we've done here, if he can get the message out to ordinary Catholics and ordinary people and everywhere else, not just the radicals and the reactionaries, the progressives and the trads who get the airtime, he will not only bridge the gap between the so-called left and right, but reorient things to address the problems and concern of all of us in the middle, those whom Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson called the common man, who, as he reminded us in his book, The Religion of the Common Man, has some claim to consideration since it was his soul as well as everyone else Jesus came to save. I mean, come on, the world is not made for an elite. It's made for everybody. C.S. Lewis pointed this out. Every moral teacher ever who has pointed this out. The world was not made for, as Chesterton said, for Franciscans alone, that we're all living in poverty and living the good life and everything else by being poor, or for the rich, as Keynes pointed out, so that they can create jobs for the rest of us. It's for everyone.
Absolutely. Michael, I got to cut you off there. We're coming up on the end. Dawn, one more time for our audience. What's the main resource where they can find out more about your work, Michael's work, and everything that you're proposing and you have going on?
They should go to the website of the Center for Economic and Social Justice, which is CESJ.org, and you'll see sections, learn about resources. This is all at the top, and you're going to find a wealth of information. But also, please contact us with your questions, and that would be at info@cesj.org.
Well, one thing I'll do, and this is going to be a prayer, I'm going to make sure I tag Pope Leo on X, okay? And I'm going to say, Papa, please watch this video and please share this video. It's going to be a sincere prayer. And guess what? God answers prayers. We'll see if Pope Leo shares it. I know he's a busy guy, but we'll see. Michael Graney, Dawn Brovan, you guys are friends. We are proud to say that you're our friends, all right? These are very important conversations, and we're going to continue to have them. We've had on Dawn and Michael now, I think, at least 3 or 4 times, and we're going to continue to have them because they're very important. God bless you both. Thank you so much.
We love you guys.
Thank you, and we love you. And thank you all out there for joining us at the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Make sure you download the app, share it with your friends. If you like what Joe and I do, we're all over social media. Help us get out to a wider audience, and please share this video. Thanks once again, and remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.